guys, welcome back to Who, What, Where, a true crime podcast. We're your hosts, Caitlin,
Hannah, and Abigail.
If you've never listened before, just know this is a very chatty girls' night sleepover type podcast. We will speculate and theorize a lot, so if that's not your jam, we totally understand. But if it is, you can tune in every Monday for a full-length episode, and then come back every Friday for a Freaky Fast Friday episode, where we give you the rundown on a case, sometimes unsolved, always freaky, in 30 minutes or less. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Who, What, Where. Today's full-length episode is going to be on the death of Elisa Lam. We briefly mentioned her last week in the Cecil Hotel episode that we uploaded last week, and today we'll just do a deep dive into her life. We'll start with some recent true crime, kind of like as like a breaking news section of the episode. The Japan Twitter killer, that's what he was known in like English media, was just sentenced to death by hanging in Japan for the murder and dismemberment of 8 women and 1 man. So I looked this up, and basically he would prey on vulnerable women, a lot of them having suicidal tendencies or wanting to commit suicide. And he would also like stalk them on social media, and he would prey on their insecurities to lure them in, and then he would sexually assault them and kill them so that they wouldn't speak out to police, obviously. And then the 1 man that he killed, is my understanding that it is like an acquaintance of one of the victims, again to kind of just cover his tracks. But a lot of times, apparently, one of his like parts of his like MO would be that he would claim that he would kill himself alongside of the people who were suicidal that he had like lured into his traps, sort of. This is a long time coming, though. The various body parts of the victims were discovered back in 2017, so it's been a long time coming, and glad that his victims are getting some justice. Okay, so let's start with today's episode. Basically, I've broken up this episode into the typical who, what, where kind of style that we do for the beginning part of the episode. But then kind of the more interesting part is the how and the why, especially of this case. It's interesting, but it's also very tragic. Whatever ended up happening to her, whatever theory you believe, it's a really tragic death that Elisa Lam succumbs to. So I just want to keep that in mind, that I'll say interesting maybe a few times, but it is really tragic that she died in this way. And I'll also, towards like the middle to end of the episode, I'll start kind of discussing more in depth some of the really weird parts of the case, like the elevator footage. And yeah, so just don't worry if you don't hear that in the first couple minutes, because I'm kind of giving a background of Elisa herself and the location too. So Elisa Lam was a Canadian student at the University of British Columbia, Vancouver. She was also known by her Cantonese name, which is Lam Ho Yi. She was the daughter of immigrants from Hong Kong. But as far as I know, her family also lived in Vancouver, so she wasn't going to school like far away from home. I think it's important to mention that she was only 5'4", so she was a small statured woman, and she was 21 at the age of her disappearance and death. She also, this is another important thing to note, suffered from bipolar disorder. So a lot of the different kind of research that I did came to the same point, that a lot of people, and basically what the official ruling was that she suffered from bipolar disorder, and that caused her to do some weird things that night. And she was on a few different types of medication at the time. These all showed up on the toxicology report, even though technically the toxicology report was never able to be completed. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. That day that she died, she had taken at least 1 antidepressant, but she had not taken her antipsychotic. And in my research, I also found that the use of antidepressants to treat bipolar disorder is not entirely uncommon, but the risk is manic side effects if it's done without taking an antipsychotic to kind of like off balance it. I don't know a ton about that. I'm not a pharmacist or a doctor of any kind, but that's kind of what I got from my research. According to that toxicology report and like the autopsy, she had no alcohol or illegal drugs in her system. She had been prescribed to 4 different medications. I didn't do a ton of research on each of these medications because I probably would have gone down a rabbit hole. But she basically, the point I'm trying to make here is that she was prescribed to a lot of different medications. The only medications or drugs of any kind that were in her system that day were drugs that she was prescribed by a doctor. And based on that autopsy and toxicology report, she had taken her prescribed stimulant medications, but neither of her stabilizer medications. So that may have led to a manic episode, which could explain her actions that night and could explain how she would have kind of superhuman strength when it came to climbing into a water tower and then closing the lid on top of her. So now we'll talk about the what. This was a really big case in like the media. It was highly publicized because of kind of just the weirdness of the case. So I'm sure you guys have probably seen and heard, but the short version is she was reported missing and had disappeared on January 31st, 2013. That day was the day that she was supposed to check out of the hotel. Apparently she had made contact with her parents every single day she was on this vacation, except for the day of January 31st, 2013. So that is why, obviously, her parents ended up calling the hotel and they were not able to find her. About 2-ish weeks later, 2.5 weeks later, she was found dead in one of the tanks on the roof of on the Cecil Hotel, which is also the Stay on Main Hotel.
Well, it's been renamed.
It was rebranded to Stay on Main Hotel after this, though.
It was after this?
I believe.
Oh, okay.
So this part is a little bit disgusting, just warning you guys. The water tank that she was found in provided water to guest rooms, a kitchen, and a coffee shop. So one of the reasons why they're like, oh, let's go look in the water tanks was because guests were complaining about low water pressure. And some had also claimed that their water had an unusual taste and was even black in color. So, Yikes.
Like, what would make it, I guess, like, the body decomposition, like, probably release some chemicals that would make it black?
In theory, if what they ended up ruling was true, that she was, drowned in the water tank and she had been in there since January 31st, that would be, like, over 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would mean that she, had been decomposing for 2.5 weeks in water. So I'm not surprised that the water tasted weird.
I'm not either, but you also, human bodies decompose slower in water than they would like exposed to the elements.
Mm-hmm.
It surprisingly like preserves it, especially since it's still water and not like
Running
a
water.
river, an
Mm-hmm.
ocean, or a lake. So it's still, which helps like preserve it, which is how they were able to do the toxicology reports and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So basically, again, long story short, like I said, I'll talk a little bit more about kind of the unusual parts of the case in a little bit, as if the case I've already mentioned to you isn't unusual. Her death was officially ruled as an accidental drowning, and they believe basically that her bipolar disorder was a significant factor in her death, like I said a little bit ago. I found this too, which is kind of interesting. The last person to see her alive, we believe, allegedly, was the owner of a local bookstore. Her name was Katie, or her name is, I'm not sure if she's still alive, is Katie Orphan, which is an interesting last name. And she remembered from that day that Eliza had bought books and music for her family. So it seemed like she had plans to return home, which is why the suicide theory for me isn't that convincing. So unless something drastically changed from when she was buying these books and music for her family until when, she actually went up to the water towers. And then she had this is an interesting fact as well. She had originally booked a shared room, kind of like a
hostel.
Like a hostel with other guests at the hotel, but Lam's roommates had complained of odd behavior, which forced Lam to be moved to a private room. But the fact that it seemed like she wasn't taking her medication correctly could lead to other kind of instances of odd behavior.
Yeah, it's a super sketchy area. And like most of the people that stay at the hotel are like homeless or transients of some kind, so they're like moving around a lot. I have to assume it was solely because of the price point that she decided to stay there, because I can't really see how she would be like, oh yeah, this is like a nice hotel for me to go on vacation.
Yeah, I just feel like it's weird that no one, like, there are photos of her on social media, and she had an active Tumblr blog, and so she was like, it didn't seem like she didn't have like friends, and so I'm wondering why none of her friends were like, oh yeah, that hotel is like really freaky, you probably shouldn't stay there, unless she didn't tell anybody that she was going. I don't know.
Well, and I listened to a podcast about this case a while back, and I guess she was on some kind of like discovering herself trip, because she like worked her way down the coast from Vancouver.
She took a variety of like city buses, Amtrak trains, Greyhound buses, to get all the way down from Vancouver to LA. So yeah, and she's a young college student, so that's not entirely unheard of. Like, college students do that all the time. So that in itself isn't weird. It's just the location she chose is kind of weird to me.
I mean, LA is expensive, so again, I have to feel like
maybe
it might just be the price point was right.
And for all we know,
she's Canadian, so like maybe she didn't know.
Maybe she didn't know, or for all we know, she could have been staying at a bunch of other kind of weird, sketchy hotels along her way. So like I mentioned at the beginning of this, those are kind of the basics, facts, sort of, I would say, of the case. But now is where we'll start to kind of speculate on the why and the how of the who, what, where, when, why. So like I talked about at the beginning of this episode, what we've discussed so far are the basics, or what I would like to say kind of the facts of the case. But now is where we'll start to speculate on the why and the how, and also discuss the really odd elevator footage that you guys are probably all like, please talk about the elevator footage. Because that is arguably the most like publicized part of the case. That's why I knew about this case, was because that was like on every news site for a long time. Right when this happened back in 2013. So the footage that is like been widely spread, I think, is only about 3 minutes long, so you guys can totally watch it yourself too. Maybe even like watch it while you're listening to this. It begins with Eliza walking in to the elevator. She then like bends down and presses at multiple buttons, and then goes and stands in the corner and just like stands there, looks straight ahead. She's not smiling. She's not doing anything like.
She has like her back to the wall too, and it actually kind of looks like she's like pressing herself against the wall to not be able to be seen by somebody walking by. Right. It's also weird that the elevator door like never closes.
Yeah, so the elevator door does not close after she presses the buttons, and the elevator does not start to move at this point of the video.
But she's like definitely pressing the buttons. Like, no, why would she totally be faking?
Because you can kind of. I'll preface this also by saying the video footage is extremely pixelated. It's hard to make out really any specifics. Like, you can tell obviously that it's her. She's in an elevator. But it's hard to see, what number button she's pushing, or is she going to the floor she actually was staying at. So the footage is very pixelated, but you can definitely tell that when she, presses the buttons on the elevator, they do light up. So she is pressing the buttons to go to a different floor. She peeks out of the elevator and then quickly steps back into the elevator as if she had seen someone that she did not want to see or didn't want them to see her. And she hides So at first she goes back to the normal corner that she was standing in, and then she goes like to the corner where the buttons are. So like she's really actually hiding from somebody, it looks like to me.
Yeah.
And this time after that, she peeks out again and of the elevator, and this time it looks like she's doing it for a longer amount of time, possibly talking to somebody.
So at one point she's standing outside of the elevator for a while, and
yeah,
she could be talking to somebody.
Yeah, so that, in my opinion, it looks like she is talking to people outside of the elevator. However, pretty much all of the like evidence and any witnesses that have talked to them, they said that day they did not see Elisa Lam with anybody in the hotel. So
it could have very well been a hotel staff, though.
Could have been a hotel staff, and they just maybe wouldn't have thought anything of it if they saw her with a hotel staff, because maybe he was just helping her with her bags. Maybe he was, taking her up to her room. I don't know. She then goes in and out of the elevator a few times, like kind of back and forth, and she has some really odd arm movements. Again, it really, to me, looks like she's talking to somebody. When like you're having a conversation and you're maybe a little bit emotional, or like you're just really into the conversation and you move your hands a lot. That's what it looks like. She then re-enters the elevator with her hands on her head. And this is where the video...
Isn't there this part where she, like, is holding under her head and she's, like, looks like she's trying to get her balance? Like, she puts her hand on, like, the wall to get her balance?
Part that I'm talking about right now is she comes back into the elevator, she has her hands on her head, then she kind of, like, puts her hands, like, down, like she might be trying to, like, grab onto something, like...
to steady herself, yeah.
And this is where, in my opinion, I don't know if the video was slowed down. To me, it looks like it was like put in slow motion, and she like tries almost to steady her balance, and kind of get her bearings, which would kind of fall under, the theory that maybe she was having kind of a manic episode, and her head was spinning, the room was spinning, she was having hallucinations, something like that.
But if it was slowed down because they wanted to make it look like she was having some kind of episode, like, and so, like, at normal speed, it would just be, like, her, like, touching her head briefly. Like, if it was slowed down that much,
That's why the video, to me, is really odd, because it looks like it's put in, like, slow motion, almost, to make it maybe, like Caitlin's saying, look like it was something that it wasn't. After she goes back in the elevator and she kind of gets her balance, she then presses a series of buttons. She doesn't, like, run her finger down it, but she, like, is bending down, looking at the buttons and pressing a series of buttons before stepping back out of the elevator. And then again, more weird hand movements at this part. She is looking like she's trying to explain something to somebody, like through her hands. Also, I think it was at this part that I noticed that it looks like her hands are kind of blurred. Like, maybe she was doing sign language of some sort.
I know. I did see somebody that was, like, when she's briefly doing, like, things with her hands, it looks like sign language, like...
Like, and it looks blurred in the camera footage. And like I said, the camera footage is not great anyway, but it looks like even, like, more, like, centrally located blurring of her hands. As to, like, not show maybe what she was saying. Because maybe she was, like, signing help me. She then steps outside of the camera, and she's not seen again in the footage. So, like, she goes out of the elevator and steps to the left, and you can't see her anymore.
Yeah.
Then, this is the weirdest part to me. At that point, the elevator door closes, and it starts, going to the floors that she had pressed. And then, like how an elevator works. You guys know how an elevator works. The door is open, it waits a second, the door is closed, it goes to the next floor. Right?
So
Which seems like that makes it seem like somebody was holding the button.
So yeah, that's my question is like, why didn't the doors close all of this other time? Because she wasn't for some of the video, it wasn't like she was standing in like the doorway where
she would be blocking the doors from closing.
Like, the sensors that would allow the doors to close.
So I know some hotels, like some elevators have like a stay button. And it, like, won't move until you, like, tell it, like, okay, now I'm ready to move kind of thing.
Well,
but
kind of what you were saying, Abby, that, like, maybe someone was holding down a button that was, like, making the elevator stay on that level. which would kind of track if there was someone outside of the elevator.
Yeah.
So, another weird point about that is, and in my experience with elevators, which I'm not an elevator expert, but I've been on a few elevators, and if you hold the door for too long, a lot of time, like, kind of like a siren goes off, like a loud monotone beeping. And again, that would, if she wasn't talking to anyone, wouldn't that at least alert somebody to her location?
I totally know what you mean.
I don't know. So I'm not sure about the science of elevators. I don't know if that, like, is actually like an alarm that it sends to, like, the security system. Mind you guys, this is the Cecil Hotel. I don't know how their security system works anyway, because...
Well, it's an older building, so, like...
It was after.
The hotel was in... Or the elevator was installed a lot later than it was built, so, like, who knows?
Yeah, I don't know what their security system is, because the amount of crazy stuff that's happened at that hotel makes me question their security system, is what I'll say.
Right,
there.
like, I'm just surprised there wasn't any security camera footage of the hallway, which makes me think there was security camera footage and the hotel is covering it up.
No, there's a camera at the end of that hallway. Like,
but like
they interviewed the hotel staff, and there is a camera that would be able to see the outside of that elevator from the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
But they said that it collected no footage.
Weird.
Basically, another thing that I just want to throw out there is that there was, I don't remember if it was I think it's footage of Elisa Lam meeting with two men in, like, black suits in the hotel lobby, and they present her with, like, a small white box.
Wait, this is confirmed?
Yes. I don't believe that the, like, footage was ever released to the public, but the main detective in the police report said that they had video footage of her meeting with two men in the lobby and then presenting her with, like, a small white box. And nothing else was ever said about that.
And
it was in, like, a police report?
Yes. Like, the main detective stated that they had that recording.
Weird point there. And so this entire conversation about the footage, really the main question here was the footage edited? Kind of like what Caitlin was saying about, like, if there was a hotel employee involved, wouldn't the hotel kind of want to save their ass and, like, cover it up?
Oh, they 100% would do that.
So, like I've mentioned a few times, the video quality is not great anyway. It's security cam footage. I do not know why security cam footage is still so bad. Like, I've seen, there's, like, a meme that I've seen before that it shows, like, literally a photo of outer space, and it's, like, this beautiful photo, high def, and then it shows, have you seen this person? And it's, like, you know, like, basically, like, a video game, like, how, like, pixelated it is. Which
CCTV is, like, not
great.
Not great, yeah.
And so that, just keep that in mind. But the timestamp in the bottom corner is almost entirely unreadable. But a few people do claim that it skips forward at one point, as if some footage had been removed.
Which I've watched it so many times, and I don't know how they got that. Like, I can't read anything.
You can't read it at all. I think it's people just assuming. There's, like, no chance you could be like, oh yeah, like, a couple, like, numbers are missing, so it skipped ahead. Like, you can't see it at all, in my opinion.
Yeah. Like I said also earlier, there is a part of the video that, to me, it looks like it kind of went to slow motion, so that would also beg the question, was it edited there? Or was she experiencing kind of this weird manic episode where, I don't know, she, like, was moving kind of in slower motion? Some people also believe that at one point, while Lam appears to speak to someone, her mouth has been pixelated.
Like, purposefully?
Like, purposefully obscuring her words. And then, like we also mentioned, there is that one part where, to me, it looks like her hands were blurred as to not show what she was, like, insinuating with her hands. But again, I don't know. To me,
This
the
is
footage is basically one of the biggest points of evidence they have, but it's so bad quality that I don't even know if you could speculate, oh yeah, it's been edited, they've pixelated some things more than other things were pixelated because it's so pixely itself, like the video.
Well, and like I
So-
was saying earlier, I was like, you can use this footage to argue whatever you want, you know? Like, you can take whatever theory you think it is and use the footage to justify that.
Yeah, so you could think it is a manic episode, which the footage kind of explains that. You could think that she is playing the elevator game, which we'll talk about in a second, which is like a Korean urban legend, I believe. You could think that she was talking to a hotel like a hotel worker who then helped her
Get
onto
to the roof. Yeah.
possibly, injuring her or hurting her or killing her even. So it really kind of, you're totally right that it really goes with whatever theory you want to prescribe to.
And, good evidence doesn't do that. Like, good evidence, like, will point you in one specific direction and that's it.
Yeah, and so that's
Like, I think
why
everybody is just using the footage to, like,
kind of grabbing
it's
at
like
straws.
confirmation
Yeah,
bias,
yeah.
It's like, oh, I already have this idea in my head of what happened, so I'm going to use this footage to, like, explain that that's the way that it happened. But everybody does that with their own theories, so it's like, I think it
So
just...
what's the truth?
Yeah,
It's
and...
almost impossible. And, I mean, honestly, that's kind of why I feel like the investigation, if you could even call it that, was cut short.
Yeah,
because they were like...
Speculating isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, any kind of speculation isn't going to help. There's no eyewitnesses that see her with anybody else, as far as we know. And, like, kind of the toxicology and autopsy reports are kind of inconclusive.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
So now we'll talk about the water tanks, which is another huge part of the story. Obviously, that's where her body was found. There are 4 water tanks, I believe. It might be 5, but I think it's 4. And they're kind of, just in like a little square in like the corner. It's important to mention here that only hotel staff keys can unlock the doors to the roof. So it's kind of like, security so that people don't get up there. I did read that it is technically possible that she could have used the fire escape to get up there, but it's almost also...
Like, implausible.
It's implausible, but it's also unlikely that happened because it would have triggered alarms that then would have hopefully triggered...
Because as soon as you open a fire door, it's gonna... Like a fire escape door, it would set off an alarm. Especially at a hotel.
Unless this hotel is so, like, their security system is so outdated or so bad that
Which is totally possible.
Which technically could be.
If they're only charging, like, $30 a night, like, they probably can't afford to do a lot of, like, repairs.
Yeah. The water tank opening, so, like, a water tank, I don't know if you've ever seen a water tank, but it's like a giant cylinder, and you have to have a ladder to go up it to the top.
There's usually, like, a ladder on the outside of most water tanks, though, right? Like, just, like,
so
attached to it.
What I read about the water tanks is that there were no ladders found around the water tanks.
Oh.
So it's possible she had to get a ladder to
Do you know how tall the...
10 feet.
Oh, my gosh. So
And
it's not even like somebody could have, like, thrown her in there.
She's 5'4". She's not she's a very small statured woman. So it to me, it's almost entirely impossible that she climbed up there herself. And so then this is another point with the water tanks. She would have had to climb up herself, open the lid, which presumably is very heavy, get in the water, close the lid on top of her.
The lid that has no interior handle. So she would have had to, like, walk her hands.
Right. But the lid itself, too, when they discovered her body in there, the hotel employee that was, like, kind of responding to the complaints of the...
the water. The taste of the water.
Yeah,
Got you.
he went up there and he thought it was weird because it wasn't latched. So that kind of tracks that she could have closed it herself because she can't latch it from the inside.
Because if somebody put her in there, they would have latched it probably, right? To avoid suspicion.
Maybe, but maybe it was, there is kind of a theory that she was killed before she was put in the water. That's technically possible.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing that sucks is
And then maybe they wanted
after-
to make it look like it was a drowning, so they didn't latch it.
after 2 weeks of decomp, like, but she would have drowned if somebody put her in there alive and closed the lid on her. She would have drowned then.
Eventually, yeah.
So when they do a toxicology report, generally, they would do it from, like, your veins. Like, they would just take blood from your veins and do it that way. But I remember reading the autopsy report, and there wasn't enough of anything in her veins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But because she was in water, her internal organs were preserved enough, like her liver and that kind of thing, that they could
that's what they used
That's
instead.
what they used for the toxicology report. But also, I think it's just, like, it's not realistic to me personally that she climbed in there and, like, accidentally drowned. And if we're saying, like, okay, so a hotel staff had to be present to open the door, or there had to be some roundabout way that she got up there. And the guy that found her was like, oh, it wasn't latched. They totally could be covering up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's totally possible that they're just trying to save their ass.
Yeah. Well, because if they had found out even later, that, like, a hotel employee did it, I don't know, it'd be, like, too late, because then it would be like, oh my god, this body has been in our water tank, and you're just now telling us, and then and also, if you, like, buy into the idea that all the people working at the hotel are, like,
in on it?
very, like, well, not even necessarily in on it, but they're, like, willfully ignoring any crime that happens in the hotel.
So the main question with the water tanks was basically, did she kind of just want to go for a night swim there, and she, was swimming and then ended up dying or drowning? But the question with that is, why would she have closed the lid then if she was just going for, like, a swim?
Like, I was reading the autopsy report, and she was significantly more decomposed on the lower half of her body, because you know how when you're, like, trying to float on your back intentionally, I mean, she was dead, but your legs, like, will bow under the water a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, the upper part of your body's a little bit out. And so she was significantly more decomposed.
Which tracks if she...
I mean, she was more decomposed on the top part of her body that wasn't underwater, is what I'm trying to say.
I see, I totally understand what you're saying.
Yes.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because even if you're trying to float and you're conscious and holding your body as straight as you can, you still sometimes sink a little bit. Yeah.
So, and maybe if she had gone up there for, like, a swim...
Why would you swim in a water tank?
I mean, maybe she was... if you follow kind of the idea that she was having, like, a manic episode, and she was like, well, I want to go swimming.
Autism in women can often be misdiagnosed as bipolar disorder, because, like, women with autism...
present differently.
Yeah, present their autism differently than men with it. And so I found people with autism can be, like, attracted to water as one of their kind of, like, characteristics. And so I thought that was interesting and just worth a mention.
So again, that would kind of explain that if she was having some sort of episode,
or accidentally ended up in there.
Or she accidentally ended up in there because she wanted to go swimming.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible. But then it begs the question, okay, why was the lid? Why did she close the lid? Or why did somebody close the lid on top of her?
Also, why were her clothes off?
Yeah, so
in the water with her.
Let's talk about the autopsy report. That was a good segue, because we kind of already mentioned it a little bit, but her body was found naked in the water tank. And her clothes that she was wearing in that elevator footage, so that tracks, were floating beside her in the tank. She also went to this hotel, like, and that's another, like, there's a lot of weird things leading up to this actual
and I do
event.
know that one of the, like, most prominent ideas is that she just got really freaking unlucky. Like, she decided to stay at the hotel but didn't know anything about it. Kind of was unlucky. Like, she didn't happen to see anything bad about it.
Wanted to go swimming, was unlucky.
There's a lot of people that are like, yeah, we believe the LA coroner, like, this is pretty cut and dry. Like, it was just, like, she was, like, a victim of circumstance almost, so.
Mm-hmm. And then there was a sand-like particulate found on her clothing that was in the water with her. So that's weird to me. I don't really know what that could mean. I'm curious what you guys think.
I don't even think anybody had a theory on where it was from.
Yeah.
There wasn't, like, a theory of, like...
So, I mean, she was in LA. It's possible that she had gone to the beach, I suppose, that day, and gotten a sand-like particulate on her. That is totally possible. But I also, this is kind of crazy random, but, like, you throw sand on something when, like, it's on fire.
Oh, totally.
You know? And I don't know. I'm not sure about that. There's also a theory that Caitlin mentioned to me earlier when we were doing research that she had possibly spent the night or spent some time with a man in a hotel room, possibly.
Well, she was wearing men's shorts.
She was wearing men's basketball shorts. And so maybe that man was doing something in those clothes the day. I don't know.
And I think that's like a little bit of stretch, if you think about it. Like,
well, and a lot of the
because lots of women wear men's clothes because they're comfortable.
She totally could be, and it was presumably it was late at night.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very possible that she could have been like just about to go to bed or something.
Yeah, she was just like wearing lounge
maybe going
clothes.
to get ice. I don't know, and she just was severely unlucky.
Yeah, I mean that's always possible that she just kind of just time after time like fell under circumstances that were just
not great,
freaking unlucky.
Bad.
You know.
Yeah. Like we've mentioned a little bit, when her body was discovered, it was moderately decomposed and very bloated. And then I'll kind of go through a bullet list points of what I took from the autopsy report in my research. There was no evidence of physical trauma, sexual assault, or suicide. However, like Caitlin mentioned, there was kind of some, I don't know how to say this in like a nice way, discoloring. One of the things I read was marbling of the skin.
Yeah,
like,
marbling is what I
from
read.
Decomposition, which would kind of hide any
like bruises
some
or
forms of physical trauma.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I mean, it's pretty hard to choke somebody with your bare hands, but bruising from choke marks. But again, she would still have damage to her windpipe.
You would assume, yeah.
She would,
right, yeah.
for sure.
The toxicology reports were somewhat incomplete because not enough of her blood was preserved, like Abby said. But then they did use kind of some of her organs that were preserved to figure out what was in her system that day, which we found out was basically just her prescribed drugs. Mm-hmm. No, not even any alcohol, which she was 21, so she could legally go to a bar and drink. No rape kit or fingernail kit results were ever shown to the public. As far as we know, they were those kits were like taken, but they were never completed.
Yeah, it's like listed on the autopsy report as evidence, but,
mm-hmm. but
in the autopsy report it doesn't,
yeah.
or the released autopsy report, it doesn't say like the results of that. And I was thinking about fingernail kits, like I know that they're usually checking for like DNA of somebody else, like if they scratched them.
Right, to see if they were like trying to fight back.
And like if she was in water, I can't imagine that any of that would have been still there. So maybe there was literally no evidence that came from either of those, and that's why they didn't have anything in the autopsy report. But they still should have put like, oh, there was nothing.
With the whole rape kit and fingernail kit, basically the kind of two theories with that is, okay, yeah, there wasn't anything, or there was something, but they had already kind of thought that the death was accidental. That it was like they didn't want to. I
totally think it's like a confirmation bias thing.
Yeah.
So like the reason that this case is closed is 100% just because they, from the very beginning, were like, oh, it was an accident. It was an accident. It was an accident.
So my point being that there could have been results with those two kits, but it's possible that they didn't even run them because they had already thought it was an accident. That's kind of the point I'm thinking.
And there. I don't know, this is just such a peculiar case. You think that you would take the time to look into it more deeply?
Yeah. So this next part I'm going to say is a little bit graphic, so just trigger warning, I guess, with that. That there was a pooling of blood in Lam's anal area, which some may believe could be linked to sexual abuse, but one pathologist noted that it could be from bloating in the course of body decomposition. So that's kind of inconclusive there, in my opinion.
And again, you can also argue that that is like the type of evidence that somebody would they would cherry pick it to confirm what they already believed, you know?
Right. So if you believed there was foul play, you'd be like, oh my God, yeah, they should have, like, that is sexual abuse.
Yeah.
Or
this
if you
is
believe
all...
that it was accidental, you're like, yeah, that just happens. But I will say that a lot of the pathologists from, like, the reports that I read seemed a little bit ambivalent to say that this death was an accidental drowning.
Oh, really?
They seemed kind of like, maybe it's not, but
yeah,
there wasn't enough evidence, I don't think.
And I wonder if, to an extent, like, the lead coroner or maybe even the police department, like, was like, we want you to say it was accidental because we don't have any proof to the contrary. Because, like, a lot of the theories are just pure speculation.
Yeah.
Like, there's no actual proof. And so, like, it would have... like, when do they stop? Like, when does it become a waste of resources and they give up, you know?
Yeah. And then I also put this in here because it kind of has to do with the autopsy, in that when her body was found, her phone was not found with her body, with her clothes, nor in her hotel room. So that's weird to me.
So
like, 2013 wasn't that long ago. It wasn't like people didn't have cell phones and they weren't, and like we had mentioned, she's contacted her parents every single day that she was on this trip.
So, I can't remember which... I've listened to a couple podcasts about this case, and I do remember somebody mentioning a fact that I had never heard before, and it was that something got posted on her Tumblr page after she had already gone missing. But that can be explained away by anybody that knows Tumblr. Like, you can cue stuff. Her Tumblr blog was, like, she posted a lot of, like, art and fashion stuff. Yes. But she also talked a lot about, like, depression and anxiety. So it was very, like
Tumblr.
It was very Tumblr. I mean, I was on Tumblr in 2013, and this was... People didn't post a lot of, like, original content. Like, a lot of people would just share...
repost, like, quotes or, like, cute pictures. I read that she had a lot of, like, fashion that she posted on there, and then a lot of, like, quotes that were a little bit, like,
dark, but like
dark, depressing kind of thing.
She just kind of honestly, like, sounds very like she's, like, really into fashion and film and everything, but she also is, like, you know, she's, like, a young woman who's, like, a little bit, like, conflicted about her life. Like, it actually says that she shares... So, like, in her, like, description on her Tumblr page, it says she has the Chuck Palahniuk quote, "You're always haunted by the idea you're wasting your life."
Yeah.
So that could explain why she was in LA in the first place, you know?
Lam's parents filed a wrongful death suit, basically saying that the hotel failed to inspect and seek out hazards in the hotel that presented an unreasonable risk of danger to Lam and other hotel guests.
So they were upset that you could get onto the roof without access, or without, like, a card.
And pretty much immediately it was dismissed. Well, not maybe immediately, but eventually it was dismissed, saying that they could not have reasonably foreseen that Lam could have... Even if she could have gotten onto the roof, they wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, she could totally get onto the water tanks by herself and close the lid on top of her.
And with a wrongful death suit, I feel like they would have to prove that Eliza got onto the roof by herself without the help of a employee.
Yeah. Okay, now we'll start talking about the theories. There's one I want to mention really quickly because it's kind of...
Like, too weird to be a coincidence.
It's very much like a conspiracy theory, I would say, with this case. There was a tuberculosis test that was being studied nearby Hotel Cecil around the same time of, you know, this death and disappearance of Eliza. And the name they were calling the test was, this is in quotes, Lam, and then a dash, Elisa. Same, Eliza, same spelling.
So it stands for, forgive me for my bad pronunciation, but it stands for lipoarabinomannan, LAM, enzyme-linked immunoabsorbent assay, like ASSAY, which is spells out Eliza.
Okay.
Which makes me think that it's just a coincidence.
It's possible it's a coincidence. It just seems so... I mean, like, if
so
there would have just
weird.
been somebody staying at the hotel named Elisa Lam, you wouldn't really think anything of it, but because of the fact that she died in mysterious, in my opinion, mysterious circumstances, it seems like it's, like, too good to be just a coincidence.
My understanding is that there was like a tuberculosis outbreak within the homeless community
Skid Row.
around
Yes.
this area, which is really common. Like, it happens in those kind of populations because there's a lot of people interacting all the time, and they are not very healthy people. Have you guys ever gotten a tuberculosis test?
No, you have though.
Yeah, it they basically, like, on a patch on like your forearm, they like put a little bit of it into you, and then they wait, I can't remember if it's 24 or 48 hours, and then they look at it, and depending on what the reaction looks like, you have it or not.
Exactly. Can't think of any other explanation other than it being coincidental, because it wasn't really related to her being there, and the test was created before her disappearance.
She was in LA for about 5 days by the time that she went missing, too. I don't know if that's important or not, but...
Now we'll talk about the theories. For my notes, and for the sake of, like, this not being 4 hours long, I have written down basically 4 theories. I'll talk about
and these are, like, the most prominent ones, other than that it was an accident, right?
Yeah, basically, or that... Well, it includes the one theory that is, like, what they said is true, is that it was an accidental drowning, and it was potentially related to a manic episode of some sort. There are a few points of doubt with this theory, obviously. The number one being the kind of just, like, security pass that she would need to get onto the roof. And number 2 being the strength and physical ability she would have to climb up and in the water tank and then close the heavy lid on top of her.
So, Abby, you're like 5'4", right?
I'm like 5'3", yeah. I'm
so
pretty small.
I'm, like, imagining, like, her kind of being about your size, and, like, I feel like you would not be able to climb a 10-foot water tower.
No.
Like,
no.
Yeah.
No. And then the other kind of short, simple to the point theory is that it could have been a suicide, and she went up there to, like, we've already talked about this. I don't think that's true. I'm not even gonna really talk about it, but it is possible that she went in there
to
purposely drown herself. But I don't believe that. So we'll
Here's
just
the thing,
skip
though.
that
Like,
one.
I think with that, self-preservation would have kicked in.
Yeah, I don't know if you would be able to drown yourself. I don't know. Okay, and then another theory is that there is foul play of some sort involved. This would, kind of explain
The contents of the elevator footage.
The contents of the elevator footage. The fact that she is maybe talking to somebody, or, like, hiding from somebody, talking to somebody, then hiding from someone else. I don't know. Like we've mentioned already, it kind of looks like there's someone either, like, following her or talking to her. So, and then the fourth theory I have written is possibly the most, like, interesting one of the most interesting ones, and that is that she was playing the elevator game that was that is said to have originated in Korea. Basically, without getting, like, super in depth into it, because I don't know if I want to give everybody, like, the step-by-step how to do the elevator game, because I don't know if you want to.
Well, and it's like, it's come up in other cases, this, like, game.
Mm-hmm. So this specific case of Elisa Lam's death, once the elevator footage was released, that was when the elevator game kind of came into really, like, popular media, and people were like, oh my god, she was totally doing that.
It used to be more like deep web stuff.
Or, like, urban legend kind of things. So basically, without getting super in depth, like I said, you press a series of buttons going to one floor, then another, but you don't get out on any of these floors. You just, like, so you go, like, I don't even know, but, you'd go to, like, 13, then down to 2, then, like, to 6. And
I know there's, like, 2 requirements. It has to be a hotel with, like, a certain amount of floors, and you have to start on a very particular floor, which I think is 14. I think you start on 14.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to start on 13, but a lot of hotels don't have 13 because it's unlucky. It's like the same with airplanes, don't have row 13.
Yeah. And then once you get to, I think it's, like, the 10th floor, I believe, that is when you will reach your final destination.
If it's successful.
Of the other, like, this other world. So she does press a variety of buttons in the video footage. We know that. But we didn't really mention this when we talked about the elevator footage, but if you guys have seen any photos of Eliza, she does wear glasses, and in the video she's not wearing glasses. And so that would kind of explain maybe why she was pressing multiple buttons, because she wasn't sure which one was her floor, and she was hoping she would recognize it.
She's like bent down really close to him too.
She's looking very closely at the buttons. So and she does look in and out of the elevator often, so maybe she's looking to see if she made it to this other world. I don't know. The weird part about this, and kind of like the points of doubt with this theory, is one, I believe, like you were mentioning, that there has to be a certain amount of like levels in the hotel, and I believe the Hotel Cecil didn't have that many.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it wasn't working.
Yeah. And also another weird part is the elevator door never closes with her in the elevator.
Yeah.
Nor does it move with her in the elevator. So
I've never seen that happen before.
That's
that
weird.
You push so many buttons and the door never closes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's kind of weird.
So those are kind of like the 4 main theories, basically, of the case. There's obviously a lot more theories. Like, some people believe that she had tuberculosis and she was going there. Like, you know, there's a ton. If you guys want to go Reddit deep dive on this, you totally can. There are a lot of theories out there, but I guess we can just like really quickly say what your personal thought is, like, on what theory you agree with. My personal thought is that it was some sort of foul play.
Yeah, somebody took advantage of her.
The easiest for my brain to kind of understand is that she was possibly we know that she most likely was a vulnerable young adult and a hotel employee, which, like we've mentioned before, this hotel wasn't like a nice place, so maybe he or she took advantage of Eliza and, you know, took her up to the roof and was like, oh, well, we can have some fun up in like the water tank, whatever. And that's kind of my personal theory of what I think happened. I don't think it was an accidental drowning. I just think there's too many things that point against that, personally.
I will say about the accidental, like, the fact that the police believe it's accidental, it really, like, goes to show that if you have a mental illness that more easily explains away something, they're going to be like, oh, well, that's the answer. It's just like and we're guilty of this too, like saying like, oh, this serial killer, like, they have a mental illness and that's why they killed somebody. Mm-hmm. And it's so, because mental illness is not understood very well by people who don't have mental illness.
Yeah, of course they're going to say, oh yeah, well, she just was like mentally
ill. It's
the
easier way to explain it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I do want to say that I like to think that there's some kind of like supernatural aspect to this. I do think this hotel is incredibly haunted.
I agree.
And
I'll preface my theory of saying that I agree that the hotel's haunted.
And when I first heard about the elevator game aspect in another podcast, I was like, that makes so much sense to me, that that's what she was doing. Because she was very active on the internet, so it was really likely that she knew what that game was, you know, so.
I just know that there was a film called Dark Water in 2005, and it had some relation to there being a dead body in a water tank of like
and the
size.
Main character, her name's either Natalie or Natasha, and her daughter's name is Cecilia, and like it's a very similar issue,
like the Hotel Cecil.
So I think the theory with that one is that somebody killed Eliza, like, that was inspired by that movie. Like, they used that as inspiration of how to kill her.
Yeah, that could be.
Probably, like, the one that I am leaning towards the most for theories is, I mean, I know that there was some kind of foul play. Mm-hmm. Personally, I get the vibe that there was somebody in the elevator with her or outside of the elevator. I do remember seeing that, like, it could have been easily edited to make it look like there wasn't anybody in the elevator, but I just think that it's like weird to assume that she was just having a manic episode, because to me it looks like somebody that's either like talking to somebody or talking to like something supernatural, And so those are my kind of two main ones for the elevator footage. But then, as far as how she got in the tank, I have no doubt in my mind that it wasn't her, like, accidentally getting in there. And the biggest thing for me is that they didn't find her phone in her room.
Yeah,
or
that is
on
really
her,
weird. Yeah.
And that her clothes were outside the tank. And the, like, having to use a staff code to get, or key to get to the door. Like, there's just the ladder situation. Like, it's all... I just feel really disappointed in the LAPD for just, like, releasing it as an accidental death.
I totally believe that it was a hotel employee. And
it almost had to have been, right?
Like we mentioned in the Hotel Cecil episode last week, is I think that a lot of the hotel employees are possibly just complicit to, like, kind of like I was saying in that episode, a lot like don't ask, don't tell kind of mentality. Like, I won't say anything if you don't kind of thing. And that leads me to believe that maybe there was some foul play with the hotel employee involved.
Let's say, like, the manager or somebody higher up in the hotel found out that it was a staff member and they encouraged the staff member not to say anything.
Yeah. So that is basically all we got for Elisa Lam. This is going to be a little bit of a longer episode, but I think it was worth it because this is a pretty interesting, and like I said at the beginning, it's interesting, but it's also incredibly sad. And no matter what happened to her, it's unfortunate that
they brushed a lot of it off due to mental illness. Like,
yeah.
If we can't even, like, entertain the idea that somebody with mental illness was the victim of a foul play, like, it's not always the mental illness that causes everything. Like, what the heck?
So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you on the Freaky Fast Friday episode. But until then, definitely check us out on Instagram at Who What Where Podcast, and let us know your thoughts in the comments of those posts. We usually post something that's kind of relevant, some pictures that are relevant to the case. So go let us know your comments on this case or others on our Instagram.
And we'll see you for the Christmas Day episode, because Friday is Christmas Day. So
yeah, the episode we're gonna post, I don't think has anything to do with Christmas.
No, it does.
Okay.
Well, kind of.
It's sort of Christmas themed, but it's still a murder.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody.